Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today I'm going to be talking about how change comes when you've fallen at least once or twice. My guest this week is Mert Kumru, who is a former United Nations youth representative from the Netherlands, where he's from. He is also a human rights and climate justice advocate, and I had a great conversation with him about his work and his role with the UN. So, without further ado, let's get started with this episode featuring Mert Kumru.
My name is Mert Kumru. I'm 25 years old, and I'm currently studying my master's at the University of Leiden in public international law. I'm the former UN Youth Representative on the Dutch UN Youth Representative on Human Rights and Security, and I'm currently active in World Youth for Climate Justice. It's a campaign that's trying to bring the climate crisis to the International Court of Justice in The Hague, and we're trying to basically establish a new legal basis which explains that the climate crisis impacts the enjoyment of human rights and how it directly affects and causes the problems that we currently face with the climate crisis, but then on a more human rights level and a human rights approach. It also includes the recognition and the protection of the rights of future generations. So that's currently where I'm busy with. And also, I'm one of the head initiators of Network 2100. It's currently a Dutch network of, we call them, how do you say that in English? So basically, leaders of business and like people people that are trying to become those the new CEOs type of people. You know, like the board members of the future. We're trying to create a new generation of board members and like CEOs that are all sustainable and have the same goal and the same agenda, which is to stay in line with the Paris agreements. That's an initiative we're currently launching, and it's becoming something nice right now.
I'm so excited to talk with you and to learn about what got you started with this work. Can you tell me some about your background and just how you got into this activism work?
Yeah, so I think it all started when I decided to pick a bachelor's for my after when I was done with high school, and I ended up picking a law bachelor degree because I found it very interesting to understand what our rights are and how we can make a claim to those rights. And I found it interesting because it didn't exist from sort of intrinsic view of I want to protect certain elements. No, I just want to understand the law, why we have it, and how I could use it in order to benefit from it for like for as many people as possible. So it started out when I found out that a lot of our human rights are based upon a very old like norms and values, and I was like, huh, but those values and norms are obviously bounded by the time which they're written in. So how could we try to change them in order to make sure that more people enjoy them and that we could possibly save the planet that we're living on? So that's how the ball started rolling. And then in my first year, I found out about the UN Youth Delegate Program from the Netherlands, and I was so interested. So I applied, and it was an official election and stuff, and I got elected, which was amazing. And through my UN Youth Delegate mandate, I came in contact with a lot of youth activists that are working on climate change, and that's how I got involved in it, and that's how I decided that I want to make a complete shift in terms of I don't want to become like a standard lawyer in like a law firm, and that's it. No, like I just totally forgot about that, and all of my classmates like from uni were like, "Oh, you're crazy for not doing this," and you had such a clear path, and now you're just throwing it all out. And I'm like, "Yep, that's what I want to do." So my focus right now is to create a planet which is more equal in a more sustainable way, so that we could live longer in a healthier way for more people. And like in my dictionary, I would say that equality, um, equity, and like sustainability are all in the same page. And if we don't have one of these elements, if we exclude one of these elements, then the other ones are not equally as like yeah, they're just all equally worthy in my dictionary, I would say. But that's like maybe I'm just rambling on, but that's in a gist.
That's awesome. And I think it's so interesting that you abandoned that traditional path for this new one that you're on now. And I would love to know more about your work with the UN. Can you tell me some about what got you into your position as a UN youth representative and what that position entailed? I guess just tell me some about the work that you also got to do in that. Just give me the whole story on being a UN youth representative.
So it started in the Netherlands. We have a system which basically goes through numerous of rounds. So you have 3 rounds in total. You first start out with sending a letter to the Dutch Youth Council. Then they'll pick the best. I mean, I'm not sure, like 20 applications. Then you get invited for a conversation, and after that conversation, you get an invitation to go to the first round. And in the first rounds, they're trying to like throw you in the deep basically, and just want to like they ask you to present a lecture for a group of people, which is understandable for young students and young people, so that you can inspire young people to become more actively involved in all kinds of topics. And that first round is with 5 other people, and from that round they'll pick 2, and those will be the 2 that are going to going to start off in the election together. So like after that first round, you get elected with the 2 others, and then when you're with the 2 of you, you get 1 week of campaigning time, and you need to go through the entire country trying to gather as much votes from young people as possible that want you to become their new youth representative to the United Nations. And it's very interesting because you actually see that in the Netherlands, for example, we don't have a direct democratic system. So we choose our representatives and they'll become elected, but it's more of a passive system. So we always jokingly say that we're the most directly elected representatives, or like, so that's always the joke that we make. Um, but you can see that young people are actively thinking on what do you bring in for me, and like why is it important that we do this, we work with this election, and why do we have you and youth representatives, and why do we have this system, what is it exactly? So that's how that program starts off. And then once you get in, you're working together with the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, for a lot of the times. And you work with diplomats from all around the globe, young people from all around the globe, you and your representatives from all around the globe. And it's very interesting to see that systems vary very much. For example, like our mandate was very, we had all of the freedom to decide what we wanted to do and what we wanted to say. But in other countries, you see that a lot of young students or young people, I must say, are working as a sort of a auxiliary unit of the government, but then with sort of a youth token placed on top. And we call it tokenism. I'm sure you're familiar with the term, and it's something that we fight against basically, because we don't believe that tokenism is a form of meaningful youth participation. And I think that that's the basis of our work, is to have meaningful dialogues, meaningful youth participation and youth inclusion when it comes to decision making. Because we often get the criticism of, yeah, but you're so young, what do you know of policy making or crises and stuff? And then I always like pull out my Uno reverse card and tell them, well, if it was such a gift to be older in these times, why are we currently facing all of these problems? And that usually works. So
Thank you so much for explaining that and for bringing up the tokenism idea, because I think it's definitely a problem and I personally haven't thought about it that much, and I think that's really interesting. And as you're talking about rallying these votes throughout your election, I'm sure that you had so many great conversations with students and other young people around your country. What would you say are some of the biggest concerns of young people in the Netherlands?
yeah, I think so. It's a more of I wouldn't say only a Dutch problem, but also like a more of a broader worldwide problem, a global problem. It's that a lot of young people are currently facing a sense of distrust to the system and to the governments, and it's not a distrust in the representatives themselves. So like it's not that they distrust the people that are sitting in the courts or in the parliaments, but it's more the distrust of a system in general, as in how is it that this system that we are trying to uphold so dearly is treating me so bad? As in, why am I not enabled to rent a place for an affordable price? Why can't I buy a home? Why can't I start working like the same path that my parents or my grandparents did? As in, what is this sense of inequality that is currently threatening my life, but not only on like an economical scale, but also socioeconomic, as like social exclusion, and of course, with regards to the climate crisis, you see that like all of these elements are just piling up. So that's why they're sensing that the current way of doing things is apparently not working for them and for the people around them. So why should I have trust in a system that is not treating me fairly or equally as it should? So that element of distrust is becoming more and more apparent. And we saw that it increased during the COVID pandemic. We saw that during those two, essentially those two heavy years, so to say, we saw that a lot of young people were facing well, mental problems, mental health problems, but also just there was no vision of what would happen, and it made them feel more lackluster, less intrigued to actually continue with what they were doing or like to make future plans. It was all very yeah, like it was all very uncertain. And that uncertainty, that sense of uncertainty, has not been taken away by our policymakers, because right now the uncertainties have just been diversified even more. It's right now it's a sense of, oh shoot, can I afford my groceries tomorrow because of inflation? It's crazy. And that's why we're trying to say that if we want to make sure that young people are being heard from the beginning, make sure that they are at the table when the decisions are being made. So it only makes sense to discuss and to talk with young people or younger generation instead of about them. And that's a very clear distinction, what we are trying to reiterate, and like trying to like we're trying to remember, let people remember that young people are not just a passive homogenous group. No, they're very diverse, they're very different, all of them. And in order to like have a meaningful conversation with them, include them at all of these advisory boards, all of these meetings where they can actually have a say and actually influence the debate. That's what we think is the solution to that.
I think that's so true. Those issues like inflation, housing prices, those are all issues that are going to affect us and our generation. So it's so important that we have a seat at the table for those discussions. So, can you also tell me more about your activism work? Because you mentioned working at the intersection between human rights and climate change. And I would just love for you to explain some of the issues that you're passionate about, and also maybe some about the changes that you'd like to see one day.
Yeah, excellent question, Lee. I would say that when we look at the climate crisis itself, the first things that pop into mind are droughts or severe rainstorms or like floodings, etc. Of course, those are the consequences, and warming up, like the global greenhouse and gas emissions and like global warming itself are elements of the crises. But what we tend to forget is whenever these consequences are showing off, or like whenever we see the effects of the climate crisis itself, people are being affected by them, and especially young people are the most vulnerable because they don't have safety nets to make sure that they'll have a soft landing when it comes to floodings or other natural disasters. So what we see is that your enjoyment of human rights is being affected by the crisis. And it can be a very basic one. It can be your right to housing that's being affected by a flood. It can be your right um, to a healthy environment that's being affected due to, let's say, a chemical spill that happened in your neighborhood. It's all of these elements that come together in the climate crisis itself. And we see that all of those human rights that we have, that we are being granted or gifted by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that are currently being threatened by decisions that we are making as, or I mean, not we, but like that our policymakers have been making or are not willing to take in order to prevent that from happening. A very good example is you see young people in the Pacific, where our campaign also started. You see them being presented with the possibility, with the very real possibility of their entire lands, their native lands, being flooded within the next decade. That means that these people will not have a place to call home anymore, and they will eventually start relocating, migrating to other places. But what happens in other places? You see that populism is on the rise. You see that xenophobia is on the rise. So these new climate refugees that will eventually come due to our unwillingness to take action will be coming to our will be coming to places where currently Western leaders are failing to take action. And then you'll see that populism will pop up and they will say, well, it's our country, we'll protect our borders, we don't want newcomers, we don't want refugees, blah, blah, blah. And then you start with the essential problem that this all has to do with one clear thing, and that's our common shared values, our human rights. And that's why we want to make sure that is becoming more clear, because the International Court of Justice is the only United Nations, it's the final bastion, we would say, that has never spoken about the climate crisis. So it's the final frontier when it comes to addressing and acknowledging the consequences of the climate crisis on human rights. And that's why it's so important for us to become successful when it comes to asking for that advisory opinion.
Thank you so much for explaining that, because there are just so many other issues tied to the climate crisis, and I really appreciate you just talking about those issues. I have one more question for you. Lots of young people want to create change and they want to make a difference, but they may not know how or maybe where to get started with that. Do you have any advice for those people who may be listening?
Yeah, I always start out with saying, in order to stand up, you must have fallen at least once or twice. You cannot start walking and running without falling in the meantime. And why I'm saying this is that I've personally learned the most of all of my experiences from the times that I failed to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And this sounds very meta or very philosophical, but what I'm trying to say is it does not matter where you start out of. It only matters if that is the thing that you're truly believing in, is the one that is the cause that you're fighting for, then fight for it and go for it. I personally tend to believe that, for example, when you just discussed the civil rights movement in the United States, back in those days, back in the 60s and 70s, for example, the young people that were trying to advocate for civil rights, for equality, they were being laughed at. They were being spit out, basically. But they knew that the cause they were fighting for was the good cause, was the good one. So if you have that firm belief, if you have that sense of realization that what you're doing is in the essence the right cause worth fighting for, then go for it and find your own you find your own meaning in that. And I would recommend, first of all, to educate yourself and know what you're talking about. So for those people who like to read, go read reports, go read books that are in your field of interest. If books is not something that you like, doesn't matter. Watch some educational videos, watch some documentaries. Just try to learn on the topics that you want to become more knowledgeable about, because there's only one sense of a power that people can never take away from you, and that's your knowledge, that's your sense of ratio. So like, use that as a weapon, I would say, in order to protect your loved ones, yourself, and the planet that you're taking care of. So that will be my top tip, for I would say my advice, because in the end, if you all come together and if you unify with those who are in the same boat, we're all in the same boat. I mean, maybe this is a good distinction to make, Lily. I always love to say to people that you're never 2 months away from becoming the new millionaire or the new billionaire, but you're always 2 months away from becoming the next homeless person. So my question and my point is always, find your friends in those who are in an equal position or a less fortunate position that you're currently in, because together you have a much more you have much more to achieve, and you can actually achieve change in the future. So that's a tip I would give.
I really enjoyed talking with Mert, and I think he is just so knowledgeable about the issues he's passionate about. I really enjoyed his advice at the end of our conversation about lifting up those around us. It's important to value the people around you, and it's also important to remember that it's okay to fail. Mert mentioned how, in order to stand up, you have to have fallen once or twice. And I think that is such an important point to keep in mind. Everyone will fail once or twice in life, but it's how you learn from those experiences and grow as a person that really matters. It's important to remember Mert's advice, especially in those moments of failure, because change comes when you've fallen at least once or twice. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Mert on Instagram at MertKumru_VN to get connected with him. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at bethechangepodcast. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.